Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees the release tonight of The Flash from Warner Brothers / DC. And boy oh boy, the numbers are not looking very good. I've been talking about this pretty much all week on my live shows, and at $155 million projected opening weekend, that would be well below the entire global opening weekend for The Little Mermaid. And we all know how that film ended up. And we can also have some other comparisons to this movie to look at. We'll also talk about the projections for Elemental, another Disney Pixar film, which is also looking to be a massive flop. Disney and Warner Brothers being some of the biggest box office losers over the past few years, well overspending on all of their budgets and making films that people in general really don't have that much interest in going to see. Before we go any further, though, please make sure to smash that like button, lap that fire button, honestly, and smash the rumble button as well. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know every time a video, a live stream goes live on the channel. So first, starting off with the news about The Flash. And so this film is eyeing a $155 million opening weekend, which, yeah, people might say that sounds good on paper, but when you actually start to compare this to other films, yeah, this is not the kind of amount of money that you want to be making on a film that is supposed to reset the entire dceu and be your jumping off point for your future releases. Going further into the news here from Deadline, it says, after a year plus of tabloid headlines about its star Ezra Miller, and yeah, I think that's the kindest way to talk about Ezra Miller at this point in time. I mean, tabloid headlines, is that all that you have to say? You have all this commentary about other things, but when it comes to Ezra Miller, that's where you're going to leave it? You're just going to link to one of your own articles? Yeah. Good on you, Deadline, because we all know that the allegations are very, very serious when it comes to what has been alleged against Ezra Miller. It goes on to say, Warner Brothers COVID-delayed $200 million Justice League, and I don't buy that $200 million production budget that's being reported at all, because, let's be honest, these films usually at minimum cost $200 million, knowing that this film has indeed been delayed and has been delayed several times. For this film to have stayed at $200 million does not make any sense whatsoever. I would not be surprised to see this film closer to $250 million, but I digress. The Flash finally arrives in theaters. The overseas opening looks better than the domestic, with a total global of $155 to $165 and a $70 million domestic opening. Right now, their range is between $70 and $75 million. We finally have the Box Office Pro numbers, and keep in mind, normally the Box Office Pro's numbers are a lot more generous to these movies, right? They tend to take in not only what the industry projections are, but they also take into account social media interactions and ticket sales and pre-sales and all these other things. And so normally their numbers are a little bit higher, especially when it comes to these bigger releases. They only have the film set to make $69 million. You see that correctly. For right now, their range on this weekend for the movie, and normally they have it at the very bottom here, so I don't know why they decided to get rid of that overall. So now I have to go all the way back up here to the individual release. So anyway, their opening range is between $60 and $80 million. And so as you can see, around $70 million is going to be the average range there. And so Deadline and Box Office Pro are actually actually in sync with one another. And that does not happen very often. What's going to be interesting, though, is going to see where this film compares to Black Adam. It says The Flash's Thursday shows indicate that sales have shrunk from 66% above Black Adam on June 8th to only 30% above entering into June 14th. So they're comparing pre-sales going into the actual weekend itself. Now, what's interesting, though, is that if you actually look at the overall ticket sales, comparing The Flash to that of Black Adam, The Flash, if these numbers hold, is projected to sell less tickets than Black Adam. Remember, average ticket price last year, even just last year, was a lot less than it is this year, not to mention the rate of inflation. I know some people get triggered every time I mention the word inflation, but maybe ticket sales will have you thinking a little bit differently, right? So right now it's projected to make $70 million, talking here about The Flash. If you go even just back to Black Adam, when you adjust that for inflation, even just over 1 year's time, that film actually made more than what's projected to be made by The Flash. Now, we'll have to, of course, wait and see what the numbers actually are. Projections can be wrong, especially can be off, $5 to $10 million of a difference is not that uncommon for us to see more or less on these projections. So very rarely are they exactly on the money, but they're usually pretty close, especially with those overall ranges. But notice if you actually take the average ticket price of that year, right? So average ticket price was around $10.45. I've gone ahead and adjusted that for inflation too. And so essentially it evens itself out. So an average ticket price of $10.45 for the year, that would put the $75 million adjusted opening weekend for Black Adam at around 6.4 million tickets. At only $70 million opening domestically for The Flash, seeing that average ticket price now is between $13 and $14, you're looking at only 5.3 million. This makes it one of the worst openings, one of the worst projected openings in the entire history of the DCEU, right? Gone are the days when it was making 14 million tickets for Man of Steel. 19 was its peak, 19 million opening day tickets for Batman v Superman. Now it's only down to 5. The only films that actually are worse than this are the pandemic releases, where they were impacted by theater closures and day-and-date release on HBO Max. So even if you throw those out, the only film that did worse than what The Flash is expected to do was Shazam 2. If you even go back to the first Shazam movie, that film, actually because of the average ticket price being around $9, sold 5.8 on average. So again, an estimated 5.8 million tickets. That means even though that film, even adjusted, has a lower number, right, has a lower overall number compared to the projected for The Flash, it's going to have sold more tickets opening weekend. And look, I am a big fan of the first Shazam film. It's really the only DCEU film that I can honestly say I like. I would go back and rewatch. But if this is the kind of opening that your film that's been years in the making, one of your tentpole products, a $200+ million budgeted movie, yeah, that's not good. That's not good whatsoever. So let's just say The Flash is in a lot of financial trouble this coming weekend, right? And it's not going to help the fact that it has a lot of other films that it is competing up against. Now, that's not going to be the ultimate reason as to why this film fails. I think ultimately marketing hasn't been that great for it. Other than Michael Keaton being in the trailers, I honestly can't think of anything in the trailers that has me interested in the movie itself. From people who have seen it, I've heard that it's essentially a tale of two movies, right? You have the Ezra Miller movie, which is not very good, and then you have the Michael Keaton movie, which is actually pretty fun. So it sounds like nostalgia with Michael Keaton might be a fun part of this, but hey, when you have a 2-hour+ movie, that's not going to be enough, right? Nostalgia can only take you so far. You have to also have a really good story, and if you're especially going to be setting up the future of your universe, yeah, you need to do a lot better than that. So if these numbers hold right now, right, if it makes roughly 70 million domestic and only 155 million internationally, this film is going to be in a lot of trouble. Just to give you a bit of a comparison here, talking about other global opening weekends, right? Spider-Verse opened up to $208 million worldwide. This film also cost at least half of what The Flash is going to have cost. So again, that's a frame of reference there. If you go back even to the opening weekend of The Little Mermaid, as you can see, $163.8 million. That would mean Little Mermaid is having performed better than The Flash. Now, obviously, 155 is right now the average range for it, so could it be better? It could be. It could also be worse. But the fact that it's even a discussion right now, that it's going to likely have an opening weekend comparable to that of Little Mermaid, and The Little Mermaid is a box office failure and is going to lose upwards of $100 million, something tells me that we could probably look at The Flash seeing a very similar reaction. Now, of course, word of mouth is going to be a very big factor here, and I've heard mixed things about it. I've heard mixed things about The Little Mermaid, usually skewing towards the negative. So, hey, we might actually end up seeing a very similar outcome for both of these movies. Interestingly enough, Little Mermaid is pegged to have cost $250 million. And that's the reason why, one of the many reasons why I look at that and I say, wait a minute, The Flash only cost $200 million versus The Little Mermaid, which cost $250. Something doesn't sound right there in those numbers. Compare that to Fast 10. Fast 10, because it costs so much, is actually also on its way to flop because of a massive budget. But this film had a much better, right, almost twice as much, more than twice as much of what is expected to come from The Flash in its global opening. That is abysmal. That is awful. Guardians of the Galaxy, right, Volume 3. This film costs a lot less, but also has done very, very well in the long run, has had very strong holds. This movie has been able to make its money back, but again, it had a lot more positive holds and a lot more positive word of mouth than what I'm seeing so far from The Flash. So you go ahead and compare this to almost any movie. Super Mario Brothers, it's not even going to hold a candle. Barely above what John Wick Chapter 4 did, but this film also did not cost nearly as much. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, Mania, the giant MCU flop. Guess what? That film will have made more in its global opening weekend. So as you can see, these are numbers that are really not good for The Flash going into it. And I got to go back to those average ticket sales. I think that tells a much bigger story than anything else, that this film will be one of the lowest selling opening weekends, with the only real exception, right, as far as a fair comparison, the only fair comparison and the only fair, the only real competition against it as far as the lowest expecting and the lowest grossing of the entirety of the DCEU will be Shazam 2. And we all know Shazam 2 did awful in its overall numbers. So anyway, those are the numbers right now for The Flash. It's not really any better for Disney, though. So you have really, it's amazing. The two worst performing studios are having some of the two biggest box office flops opening in the same weekend, right? So The Flash is likely going to be a massive flop. And again, we'll be able to know more once the actual numbers themselves come out. But let's just say The Flash needs to make quite a bit of money if it's going to be able to break even. At $200 million, that would mean it needs to make around $500 million to break even. However, because I do believe that budget's probably not at 200, but probably closer to 250, I would say it probably needs to be made closer to 625 to 700 million if it's going to hope to break even. And that's not even taking into account what could be higher than expected marketing costs. Let's just say The Flash is not in a good position. Neither is Elemental. Elemental also cost $200 million. I don't know where Disney is throwing all of this money. I mean, I look at the visual effects of their movies and I think, okay, it seems that they've been roughly the same for the past several years. And since this is a lot of technology that you yourself have developed, why is it still costing you so much to make these movies? And this is no exception, right? So this movie, costing $200 million, is only expected to have a domestic opening of $33.3 million. When you're having a Disney Pixar film open to $30 million, and this film is likely not going to make much else domestically and not make much internationally in comparison, especially if the trends of their more recent films, they're in a lot of trouble. I mean, when you think about it, every single Disney Pixar film and every single Disney kids-oriented movie has been doing poorly. I date all this back really to just a few years ago, or a couple years ago, when you had the film Lightyear come out. Because what happened and what was going on with Disney when Lightyear was coming out? There was a lot of attention being drawn to the fact they were getting involved in politics in the state of Florida. There was a lot of talk about the videos that had been released of them openly admitting to wanting to put identity politics into the movies. Guess what? Parents saw that and said, no, thank you. I don't want you to indoctrinate my children. And sure enough, families have not been showing up. Now, there could be a myriad of other reasons, but when I look at this and I see box office failure every single time for a Disney movie, but then I look at a movie like Super Mario Brothers or Minions doing very good box office, it's not just because of the budget differences, right? It's not just because of the fact that these films cost around $100 million more. It's also because they're not making nearly as much as these other films that come from Universal or come from these other studios. So Elemental is also in a lot of financial difficulty. If you want a really good breakdown on this film financially, check out Valiant Renegade. He did a great breakdown of this film, and go check that out. What's also interesting is that Spider-Verse, right? Spider-Verse is expected to have yet another strong hold in the 40s range and is expected to make another $31.6 million. So this film potentially, if it does better than expected, could end up being able to either beat or get close to beating Elemental, a brand new Disney release. Never would anyone have thought that if you had these weekends going against each other, right? If you actually look at this, this would be the third weekend going across for Spider-Verse. The fact that the third weekend of a Spider-Verse movie is a potentially going to beat the opening weekend of a Disney Pixar film, if that doesn't tell you that, Disney is in a lot of danger, a lot of trouble, I don't know what else will. Another film that's going to be in trouble, and I know some people were not happy that I kind of jumped on this pretty quickly, but hopefully you can now see why. The film Transformers: Rise of the Beast, a 63% projected drop domestically. So again, not a death knell per se, but the opening weekend really wasn't all that impressive when you especially compare it to other films in the Transformers lexicon. And so it looks like here we can confirm Transformers: Rise of the Beast most likely will be another massive flop for the Transformers franchise. It just seems like it's a franchise, unfortunately, that Michael Bay, drove into the ground and has not really ever been able to recover. So yeah, Rise of the Beast, it being a flop, I'm going to stick to that based on the numbers that we are seeing here, as I do not think internationally it's going to be able to make nearly as much as some of the other Transformers movies to be able to make up for the difference of what it's not making here domestically. Little Mermaid, $261 million, so Spider-Verse will indeed pass the overall domestic for Little Mermaid. Remember, Little Mermaid has several weeks advantage on Spider-Verse at this point in time. And yes, some might say, well, look, a 21% hold. Yes, but you're talking about a 21% hold from a previous week hold from an opening. All of it stems back to the opening weekend, right? Where it came in well underneath where a film like that should have actually been made. This film is still set to lose $100+ million at the box office. And then we also have a new film in The Blackening, probably coming out because of the whole Juneteenth holiday weekend. The trailer for it is interesting. There's parts of it where I think, okay, it seems like they're doing a commentary, a parody of modern day identity politics, modern day conversations. But then they also, it kind of also has this indication, or it seems to indicate that it's, not necessarily parodying it, but is actually supporting it. It's really difficult to read the film and to read the trailer personally. So whether the film does well or not, it's hard to say, but 1,800 screens, so not a massive wide opening weekend, but $8.3 million for a film that probably did not cost all that much is probably going to be a good start. But as we all know, a lot of these smaller budgeted films have not been able to make their money back because no one has really been going to see them. So we'll still have to wait and see. Jury's still out on those movies, but those are the movies as they currently stand. So what are y'all's thoughts? I'm going to be going to see The Flash tonight because we're going to be talking about it on Friday Night Tights tomorrow. And oh boy, you bet I'm excited. I've seen some of the images coming out of the movie of the terrible, just atrocious CGI. And yeah, let's just say, I'm just so pumped and excited to see this movie. Said no one ever. But anyway, what are y'all's thoughts? Do you think The Flash is going to make more than the $70 million that it is being projected to make? Do you also have an understanding or a belief that The Flash is going to lose money? Again, $200+ million means this film needs to make, and again, in my box office projections, I do have the film set at 220. And the reason why is because there are some reports, there's been at least one report of it costing upwards of 220. But I would say, and I would argue, this is actually probably on the lower side of estimates. There's no way that this film cost only $200 million, especially with all the delays, with the talk about reshoots, and with the marketing campaign for this movie. Lord knows it probably costs a lot as they're trying to save face on the entire Ezra Miller controversy. So this film needs to probably make at least 625 if it has any hope of breaking even. So do you think it's going to hit that number? Based on these numbers, I have a lot of doubts. I really do. I'm not hearing amazing things about it. I'm hearing some good things about the film, but I'm not hearing universal praise for the movie itself. So let's just say I think it's going to be in a lot of trouble. What are y'all's thoughts? Also, Elemental. Do you think Elemental is going to be yet another Disney Pixar flop based on this opening weekend, domestically especially? I don't see how it's not a flop at this point. Disney is just not doing much of anything. You go back to a film like Lightyear, to a film like Strange World, to even a more recent release like The Little Mermaid, and even Little Mermaid with its massive IP recognition, right? People recognizing the name. Even that alone was not enough to be able to get that film to any kind of modicum of success, right? Only making $400 million worldwide at this point in time, which is still a far cry from the $625 million it has to at least make in order to break even, and that's on the more conservative side of things. So let me know your thoughts about that as well, and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If this video, smash that like button, that the fire button, honestly, smash the rumble button as well. Also, please make sure you check out the link in the pinned comment if you want to get your own Templar Odin plushie. These are still available for pre-order. I'm about 81% of the way to fulfilling the actual minimum needed in order for this to go into production. So yes, if you want to support that, support the channel, and also to support this little guy, go check out that top link to be able to pre-order yours today. Anyway, you're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Tomorrow is the Feast of the Sacred Heart in this month of the Sacred Heart. So I hope that you have a great Feast of the Sacred Heart. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my June Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off first with Patreon, Father Luca Illich, Heimir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Hat Reviews, you can check it over at his YouTube channel, Orange Hat Reviews, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel of Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel by the same name as well. Also to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my Locals members, Miss Minnesota hockey fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, and Robert Barnes, the amazing lawyer. And again, thank you all very much for being my supporters. If you want your name shout out at the end of every live stream and every video, check out the top link in the video description below. You also can get access to things like a giveaways channel where I give away Blu-rays, 4K steelbooks, all kinds of stuff every single, most weeks in the month. I try to give away something, or at the very least towards the end of the month, I will make it up with several giveaways. Basically, most people are guaranteed to walk away with something at the end of every single month. So if you want access to that, again, check out the top link in the video description below, as well as access to an exclusive podcast. This past month, I was actually able to record a great podcast with Michelle from Force of Light Entertainment. So you want access to that and also a plethora of other content, check out the link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.